We've looked a little bit at how projects and models work with each other in the Visual Studio development environment. Now let's look at how to create a model to use for our fleet management scenario. We defined a model as a collection of elements that represent a distributable software solution. Creating a model involves specifying metadata like the model's name and description. We can create a model using a wizard, and when we create a model, we have the option to choose whether we want to create that model in a separate package or in an existing package. These two choices will determine the development approach that we'll be using. If we create a model in a separate package, that implies we will be using the extension development approach. If we create a model in an existing package, that means we will be using the overlayering or customization development approach. Next, we'll look at how to update model parameters after we have created a model, and we'll look at how to view a model's dependencies, that is, what other models it is dependent upon. These are also called referenced models. So first, we'll use the wizard to create a model for our fleet management scenario, and then we will create projects to associate with that model. In AX, we have two options for approaching development. Those are overlayering and extensions. If we choose to create a model in an existing package, you must select a model that contains the elements you wish to customize as a referenced model in the wizard. This way, your new model has access to those elements. Taking this approach allows you to customize metadata and source code in a higher layer. For example, you can change the design of a form in the user layer. However, this method could potentially increase the cost of upgrading to new versions of AX in the future. If we choose to create a model in a new package, this implies we're going to use the extension model approach. Developing this way allows us to access the elements from any models that we selected as referenced models in the wizard. This also allows us to add functionality to existing code. We can create new elements as well as create extensions of referenced elements in our projects. By creating extension elements, all of the customizations and code are stored in a separate assembly. It only contains the code that was added or changed in the extension file. Since this code resides in a separate assembly, it improves performance and the ability to upgrade and test. This approach is also ideal when it comes to upgrading, so we can eliminate metadata conflicts in our code. Developing using the extension model will be discussed in greater detail in advanced development courses. So let's begin by creating a new model that we can use for our fleet management scenario, and then we'll create a project to associate with our model. To create a new model, we'll go to the Dynamics AX menu, and under the Model Management group, we'll choose Create Model. This opens the Model Wizard, and from this window we can specify our model name. So we will going to call ours DB Fleet Management. We'll give it a short description. And then this is also the model display name that we'll see in the Application Explorer and the AOT. So we'll leave that as DB Fleet Management. And for the publisher, we can stick our name in there. And then we'll choose the Next button. Now we're presented with this option if we want to create a new package for our model. And again, this implies we'll be taking the extension development approach. If we choose select an existing package, this means we'll be using our overlayering or customization development approach. For our fleet management scenario, we're going to create a new package, so we're going to use the extension development approach. So I'll choose that option and select Next. Now here is where we're going to select our referenced models, which means which other models our new model is going to be able to see, or which elements it's going to be able to access. So there are also some system models such as Application Platform, Application Foundation, and Application Suite that host a lot of the tables like the customer table, the vendor table. So for the purpose of our scenario, we'll just leave it at the application platform and we'll choose next. We'll be presented with a summary window of our model name and display name, and we're going to have this checkbox to say, hey, let's create a new project right away to start building and adding elements. So we'll choose finish. And now we're prompted to give a name for our new project to associate with our new model. So I'll call it DB Project 1 and choose OK. So now we have our new model and our new project, and we're ready to begin adding and customizing elements. Once we have our model created, we can also go back and update the model parameters at any time. To do this, we'll go to the Dynamics AX menu. Under Model Management, we can choose Update Model Parameters, and this will bring us back to the wizard screen. So the first thing we have to do is select our model name from the drop-down, the model that we want to modify. So we just created our DB Fleet Management model. We'll select that, and we can see it brings up the details about that model. So we can change the display name, the description, and the publisher on this screen. We cannot change the actual name. If we hit next, we can now change the dependency information. So if we want to add another model as a dependent model, so we can access the elements from that model, we would do that at this screen by selecting the checkbox next to the model we want. So for this particular model, I just have the application platform as a referenced model. So once we complete going through the wizard again, we'll get a summary screen and we can choose finish. Another important thing to know from the Dynamics AX menu is this option under Model Management to view package dependencies. This is going to open up a DGML file, which is a graphical file that shows all the dependencies of the different models in the system. Now if I zoom in using my scroll wheel, we can see here's my DB Fleet Management model that we just created. We can hover over it for some information. We can also click it, and it's going to give us that basic summary information that we just saw in the wizard. And we can see that it points to the application platform. This is the reference model that I selected, and this is the only reference model that I had selected. So we can see here this relationship between my DB Fleet Management model and the application platform model. We can also scroll around to see all of the different relationships that exist between the different models. When working with projects, it's important to note that each project can only contain elements from one model. If you need to use elements from multiple different models, a new project will need to be created for each set of elements that originates from a different model. Or you have to have your model configured to reference the models you need. When we want to customize elements, we can add them to our project from the Application Explorer in the AOT by right-clicking the element and choosing Add to Project. In the next demonstration, we'll look at creating projects and adding them to solutions, as well as setting the properties of a project. And then finally, we'll look at adding elements to our projects. The diagram below gives an overview of the different properties that we can set on a project. Of these properties, the model property is particularly important. You must specify which model your project is to be associated with. All of the elements in the project must be in the selected model. The startup object type is another important property to note. When you want to test or debug your application, you set the startup object type as the type of element you wish to debug. For example, if you want to test a form you're developing, we would set the startup object type as form. And then the startup object property specifies the specific form that you're going to be setting as your startup object. We can run a project by pressing Control F5, and it will invoke the startup object when you run that project. Another property to note is the synchronized database on build property. This simply specifies if you want to perform a database synchronization when a build action is performed on the project. When we created a new model, it automatically gave us the option to create a new project with that model. If we want to create a project manually, we can also do that. We currently have the solution DB Project 1 open with a project called DB Project 1. If we right-click the solution from the Solution Explorer, we can choose Add and hit New Project. This will add a new project to the same solution. We can also go to the File menu and choose New and Project. We'll choose Dynamics AX Project, and then we can specify a name for our project. We'll call this DB Project 3, and then from this drop down here we can specify again if we want to add this project to the currently open solution or if we want to create that in a new solution file. We can also import and export project package files. A project package file contains all of the elements from a project. We can use these package files to import and export between different instances of AX. A project package file is saved with a .axpp file name extension. To export a project, we go to the Project menu and we choose Export Project. This will export the currently open project with all of the elements along with it. Since this current project does not have any elements with it right now, it will not let us create an export. However, we would go in here and specify a name for the project package and choose Save. Then, when you want to import a project, we go to the Dynamics AX menu and we choose Import Project. From here, we can choose a file path and some other options for the import. For this example, I'm going to choose an AXPP file that I have on my local disk here. I'll load it in and it'll come up here with all the details of the different elements in this project. If I keep expanding, we can see all of the different XML files that relate to each element in that project. We also have the option to open the project in the current solution or a new solution, as well as to overwrite elements if they already exist. An important thing to note when importing projects into other instances of AX is that if you have a project associated with a model that you export and then you want to import it into another instance of AX that does not have that model created, the project import process will automatically create a model for that project.